Thank you for joining us today. We have some really great speakers for our multi-level coordination. I'm going to give them a second to get situated and then we'll kick it off. Perfect. All right. Of course. All right. So for this session, we have Dira Johanif from the Charles River Watershed Association and Leah Munir. Okay, perfect. Dira is the Senior Climate Resilience Associate at the Charles River Watershed Association, where she has worked in a variety of roles since 2021. Dira serves as the lead manager for the community engagement and outreach of the Charles River Flood Model and is consistently exploring new and innovative ways to engage with municipalities and watershed residents. Dira has a BS in environmental science and an MS in aquatic toxicology from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. She is also a green infrastructure practitioner. Leah is a project coordinator with Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, or CREW, and currently serves as the Charles River Flood Model Project, the Charles River Flood Model Project by coordinating its community engagement efforts. With CREW, Lee has also organized regional interfaith events and conducted social resilience research in Boston neighborhoods. Lee has a BA in English from West Virginia University and is a graduate certificate from Tufts University Urban and Environmental Planning Program. Dan Ross is with the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. He is the water planning supervisor, and under that role, he handles the 319 program. Julie Westerlund is from the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources. Julie is the One Watershed, One Plan program coordinator for the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources. She previously worked at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources as a program coordinator, watershed coordinator, and a fisheries research biologist. She also worked at the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, where she managed the education and communications program, where she helped lead regional efforts to promote low-impact development and education for municipal officials. So first up, we have Dira and Lee.
All right, thanks, Catherine, and apologies for being late. We were enjoying our regional lunches. But I think that actually gave you guys enough time to enjoy this picture that Lee and I had set up. It's a picture of a blue heron flying across a part of the Charles River. All right, so thank you so much for joining our session on engaging residents in watershed scale planning and hearing from the perspective of a couple New Englanders. And I apologize if I'm out of breath. We did run here. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. So today, as we stand in Minneapolis, I'd like to acknowledge and honor the Dakota Oyate, or Dakota people, who are the original stewards of the land and waterways of Minneapolis. And as the organization representing the Charles River Watershed Association, we acknowledge that the Charles River watershed resides on occupied territory of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag tribes, and we recognize them as the traditional stewards of this land, and we honor the legacy, life, knowledge, and skills stolen due to violence and colonization. We acknowledge that a land acknowledgement is not enough, and we continue to learn, grow, and listen to Native voices as we advocate for a resilient future. All right, so a little bit about the Charles River Watershed Association. We are actually one of the oldest watershed organizations in the country. We were formed by a group of local residents in 1965 who basically didn't accept that the Charles River couldn't be cleaned up. And our mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed through science, advocacy, and the law. And to familiarize yourself with our watershed, the river itself is 80 miles long, and after 2 days here, I'm realizing we are very small compared to you guys out here in the Midwest. But it's 80 miles long and starts in Hopkinton, and it actually flows north towards the Boston Harbor. Our watershed itself is just a little over 300 square miles, and we have 35 towns and cities in our watershed. And our organization works on a number of different program areas, including our river science program, where we established our volunteer monthly monitoring program with EPA in 1995, and it still runs today. And as an organization, we like to take a watershed scale view on when we think about solutions for climate change, which is actually really really critical for us in Massachusetts because we don't have county bodies or like watershed districts like you guys have out here. So our individual towns and cities are the ones that are actually addressing water quality issues, climate resiliency. And so it's really important for us to think about things at a watershed scale. All right, so in 2019, we established the Charles River Climate Compact, which is a regional partnership of 28 out of the 35 towns in our watershed, out of this need for thinking beyond the municipal boundary and really thinking about the boundaries of how water moves in our watershed. And so this Climate Compact, its mission is to work collaboratively to increase climate resiliency for people and the natural ecosystems in the Charles River. And that's by doing it at a regional scale. And so one of the biggest things that we've produced through our Climate Compact collaborative is the Charles River flood model. And so simply it's a watershed scale interactive GIS model that identifies where and when flooding will happen in our watershed. And also we model regional scale solutions to addressing flooding in the watershed. So whether that's implementing GSI across the watershed or thinking about regulations that would reduce adding impervious surfaces. And the project team for our flood model includes the Charles River Climate Compact itself. So that's the municipalities in that collaborative, our organization itself, Weston and Sampson, who's our technical team and actually builds the model. And then communities responding to extreme weather, which Lee represents. And the reason we have this partnership is because we understand and acknowledge that equitable solutions, you need everyone to be part of the planning process, the design process. And as an organization, we don't have a long history of working on the ground. And so we partner up with folks who already have that relationship. And then just for perspective, if you look at the map, you'll see that in the darker blue, that is where all of our environmental justice block groups are in our watershed. And you'll notice that most of them are actually in the downstream community, so where Boston is. And obviously, when we think about a watershed scale solution, any of the solutions that you implement upstream is going to help prevent downstream flooding. And so a lot of our work is thinking about how to address our flooding risk upstream so that we protect our downstream environmental justice communities. And with that, I will pass it off to Lee.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dira. And I just want to say, express immense gratitude to everybody that's here today. I mean, so just part of, I think, what's really important with community engagement is acknowledging the conditions of the moment, right, that we're about to step into with people. And so I'm thinking right now, like we're back from lunch. So that's something to consider. Dira and I ran here, I'm a little out of breath. Even so, I'm still a little nervous. I'm a little nervous because I don't often get to present in this way. Usually if I'm called to a stage, it's like I have like a tambourine and a band behind me. So it's a little different. And actually to that point too, thinking about how that connects with community engagement and those kinds of spaces too, we don't usually have physical barriers, right? Between us and the people that we're connecting with. So if anything, again, just when you're in community, if you have to have a table or something like that, what I often do is I'm standing in front of it and the table is less a barrier, more a means of connection with people. So just want to lift that up. And then again, going today, we are going after so many of you have shared your wisdom. So I just want to like celebrate that. And then also we're thinking about, you know, what are things we can lift up today for you all that are unique and can be helpful beyond what has already been shared. I also want to just, again, thinking of the conditions of this as a hybrid space, right? So we have friends listening in from the virtual world. So I just want to say what's up to y'all in the virtual space. Hello to friends there. I don't know if people can see us or if it's just auditory, but just thank you. Again, we do have an expanded community here today beyond who's just in the room, the physical room. Okay, so Thank you to Dira. So again, my name is Lee. I'm here today as program manager at this point. So my title has changed a bit. With communities responding to extreme weather, or CREW, very intentionally named that. We've talked a lot about language today and using language that connects with communities. So we are very intentionally named CREW for that reason. Our name basically says it all, right? We focus on building climate resilience by supporting and empowering communities facing climate and extreme weather crises. Where we are in the Boston area, riverine floodings for sure, one of those crises. We empower people through education, planning, and service. That service includes mutual aid and resource distribution projects, as well as coordinating a network of resilience hubs actually across the US. I did look up before I got here, even though I'm not the main resilience hubs coordinator, but there is one in New Ulm. So the New Ulm library system is actually a CREW resilience hub. So shout out to them. We also coordinate a nationally recognized week of climate preparedness events every September, intentionally done so to connect with Emergency Preparedness Month. So just thinking again, if you want to do events, if you can connect them with a calendar and so other things that are happening, that's always favorable. And something that's my favorite, a project that we do is a Boston area depaving initiative where we help residents remove pavement from their driveways and yards. Okay, so just love to see a show of hands. Who's worked in service before or had a service job? Okay, yeah, awesome. So what about the work that you do now, right? What brings you here? I would argue that this work we do now is also service work. So that might not have been what you connected with initially when I said a service job. People often think of like service industry or those kinds of experiences. But if I can impart anything on you all today that you take away from this, is a reminder that we are in service. So whenever we're entering a space, even the space we're in now, we are coming, it's part of a calling, right? This is a sacred space. We are in service to each other, to humanity, to the earth, to our rivers. So everyone's hands, right, should be up when we're asking that question. And then I also want to recognize that society often creates a box that does devalue what we were initially thinking when we were connecting with service, or diminishes those experiences. And if, you know, I'd actually argue that those experiences that everybody raised their hands about actually have the greatest value and the greatest impact when we're engaging with people, if you allow it to, right, if we draw upon that. So being a teacher, a bartender, a musician, mowing your neighbor's lawns over the summer, taking care of elders or people who are ill, right? Those are all incredible experiences that you could draw from. And I would argue again, are actually even more beneficial when we're talking with people in community than the degrees that we have, right? Remembering people's names, being interested in stories. So just want to celebrate that. It's all valuable and a source of relational practices and skills to draw from when connecting with communities. Okay, so when CREW is connecting, right? Like how do we usually connect? A lot of our engagement is with care. So we are really focused, especially early on in our project. So as Dira mentioned, the flood model project that aligned with the beginning of COVID, massive limitation, right? A global crisis. So what we often try to do is bring the lens of limitation means opportunity. So instead of seeing it as just we can't be together, how can we utilize these virtual tools and learn together with community, you know, how to navigate them and increase connection in times of crisis. And then we also focus on regional dialogues. As we emerged from COVID, we focused on traditional tabling. Often it was because we wanted to move at the speed of communities. So if people were emerging in a safe and slow way, we wanted to be with them in that. And I do want to lift up two specific ways in which we really focus on careful connection as CREW. One is our commitment to working with the municipalities that are in the climate compact that Dira mentioned. So whenever we're out in community, we reach out to municipal partners and say, hey, we're going to be out tabling. We're going to be at this event. Do you want to come with us, right? Sometimes there is like this barrier where people get nervous about being there in public and how do you do it? Just come with me and I'll show you what it means to be gregarious and connecting, right? Just, you can be there with us with it in it. And then also if you can't be there, we try to be a conduit whenever we can for particular local projects and the opportunities that municipal staff might want to get to people in community. And I can't lift it up enough. I haven't heard much yet about the use of linguistic services. And this goes beyond simply translation and interpretation. again, I'd say even if you don't have non-English speaking communities, the use of deaf and hard of hearing services. And what we've noticed, especially with working with groups, I want to lift up Rosetta Languages specifically, so important that we've worked with them because they are hiring people directly from the community. So this becomes, connected with livelihoods, these opportunities for people. They also have a lot of people on staff who not only are interpreters, but also have community organizing background. So they will also be super comfortable, coming into community and engaging with people and could learn quick on the job, right? Some of the technical stuff that you want to make sure is essential that gets to people. Can't believe I only have 3 minutes. Okay. So I do also want to just lift up some of the creative ways that we've connected with community. Imagination was mentioned earlier by Jacqueline. I connect that often with curiosity, right? The way in to being with people is you gotta catch them in the moment and get them as curious as you can before you deliver some of the things you want them to hear. So just lifting up some of those things that you're seeing on the left-hand slide there. To the left, we organized in Cambridge, Mass, a climate preparedness scavenger hunt for families to be able to do. It was a great tool for parents to be able to walk through a place-based activity along the river with kids. We also have done like voting with beans on green infrastructure in communities that we've developed with municipal staff to have like more nuanced projects lifted up for voting. And then that transformed into a poster with stickies. And then that opening exercise, that was not simply just to make you all go, oh, that's nice, that's a Charles. That's a tool, right? There's studies out of UC Berkeley that show that having a connection to nature before stepping into spaces that we're going to commune or that are going to be, in response to a crisis, having connection with nature increases our generous heart. It expands our ability to listen. It expands our willingness to help in a moment of stress. So science-based. And then as crew, we also are super committed to distributing resources. So whenever we have people in a space, our first priority is meeting a need. So before we're going to engage people in conversation about things we want to talk to them about, it's how can we serve you, right? And so just giving the example on the right here, especially just simple things. And I don't have one out of my bag because I rushed in, but I can show you. Just we distribute emergency blankets. Those are free. You take them regardless of whether you talk to us or not, right? And there's been a lot of gratitude from community members when they've engaged with us in that way. And then just lifting up. So at this point in our project, we are now thinking about more targeted audiences. So I know Dira showed you the EJ map. So we are focused on in this phase of the thought model project, doing more interactive connections and workshops with more targeted audiences within those communities. And these are just lifting up some of those examples. So again, we have some place-based outreach that we're doing. We want to do workshops with like people who live in Waltham, and that's a housing development that's directly on the river that is already, and there are a lot of low-income elders that live there. We also this past summer worked with a climate justice youth program where kids were paid basically to give feedback on our project. And then just I'm not going to necessarily get into it too much, but just obviously there are immense benefits from this more nuanced or more interactive way of engaging with people. And I guess maybe one thing I also will just lift up there is someone mentioned earlier, right? Like if you don't have the skill, make sure you have others who could help you with that. So I just want to lift that up too. If you feel like you don't have people on your staff to be able to do those workshops, groups like Crew, you could hire groups like us to help with that. And just a quick, these are just our slides to just lift up some accessible materials. Size matters. If you want to get things into people's hands, they got to be quarter page or half page. Language matters, right? We want to make sure that language all along the path of engagement is translated consistently, and then having posters that are engaging. That's everything from having a title that draws people in to questions that activate curiosity to links and QR codes to lead people if they want more information. I know, and that's strict. We have to be done. Oh, and okay. This is just a by the numbers celebrating our what we've accomplished, and just want to lift up again the uniqueness of our partnership. So if from here anybody has any questions, we would be happy to talk to you more about the uniqueness of the Crew and CRWA partnership. And call to action. Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks so much, you two. And I know that you'll be around later. So if anyone has more questions on the work they're doing, if we have time at the end of the session, please ask them. And if not, they'll be around and happy to chat. All right, next up, we have Dan Ross. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Perfect. Or actually, sorry. Oh, wait, you're good.
You're good.
Perfect, yep. Hi, so I'm Dan Ross. I'm with the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. I'm gonna be talking to you today about the Bazile groundwater management area. You may notice also on the agenda that it says Tara Anderson. She couldn't be here today. She's really sorry for that. So I'll be presenting her presentation and hopefully doing it justice, but probably not coming close, so. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about the Bazile. We're going to go over drinking water sources in Nebraska, water management in Nebraska, some background on the Bazile, and then partnerships to address groundwater contamination. So in Nebraska, we're heavily reliant on groundwater for drinking water. 88% of Nebraskans rely on groundwater for drinking water, and nearly 100% of all rural residents rely on groundwater. So as we know, public water systems are required to test the water, and domestic wells are not required. So this is where problems start to arise in the Bazile. But water management in Nebraska is essentially divided up between water quantity, water quality, surface water, groundwater, and those primary responsibilities are split up between the DEE, our natural resource districts, and the DNR, with surface water quality being responsibility for the NRDs, or excuse me, groundwater quality. Surface water quality is the DEE, and I don't know, it's all broken down on this chart up here. I'm also trying to go really fast so I don't run out of time. As I mentioned, we have these natural resource districts, or NRDs. There's 23 of them in the state. They're divided up by watershed. They were created in 1969 to replace the existing soil conservation districts. Each one has an elected board of directors, and they're tasked with different, I'm looking through my notes here, just different responsibilities for protecting the natural resources, one of which specifically is the development, management, and utilization of conservation of groundwater and surface water in the state. Trying to advance. Okay. So here we see a map of the Bazile. It covers 21 townships, 756 square miles in northeast Nebraska. It intersects 4 different NRDs and 3 basins. There's the Niobrara Basin, the Missouri tributaries, and the Elkhorn. And it also covers 8 public water systems, and which provide groundwater and drinking water to 10 communities and roughly about 7,000 residents. However, the Bazile is pretty much plagued by increasing nitrate and contamination in the groundwater, despite the efforts of the NRDs and their groundwater management plans. And the Bazile groundwater management area is a voluntary plan that complements the NRDs, their management plans, and it's an education and financial incentive campaign to change behavior in critical areas like wellhead protection areas there. And so looking at a map of Nebraska here showing nitrate concentrations, the green is nitrate concentrations between 0 and 7.5 parts per million. Yellow is 7.6 to 10, which is the MCL. Orange, 10.1 to 20, and then the red dots are over 20 parts per million samples in groundwater. So you can see that these areas there's definitely pockets of higher concentration throughout the state, one of which being right where the Bazile is. And then, so when we're talking about the Bazile, one of the importance of this is land use. We have 2 maps here. Map on the left shows land use, and the one on the right, excuse me, is depth of groundwater. So the orange map on the left, orange is cultivated crops and the yellow is grasslands. And a major portion of this area is dry land or irrigated corn or soybeans, with corn requiring commercial fertilization on it. And then on the right, the blue map, the darker blue is deeper groundwater. The lighter colors, shallower depths, and they're also very sandy soils. So this combined with the farming practices just really promotes infiltration of nitrogen into the groundwater. So for some history on the Bazile, in the 1960s, groundwater quality concerns were first raised as contamination began to affect public water systems and area domestic wells. Sorry, I'm going to try to get to my notes here. Can't do it. Okay. In the 80s, NRDs started monitoring for groundwater, and and then in the 90s, UNL is the University of Nebraska. They started doing a study. I can't see my notes right now, but if I remember, I think there were 177 wells that were sampled, primarily irrigation wells. And then I think 45% of those were between 5 and 10 parts per million. A smaller number that were over 10. And there were also 8 domestic wells sampled. Sorry, I can see the notes. I just can't find the mouse to scroll on them or see them. But anyways, so lots of nitrogen in the groundwater. At the conclusion of that study, they basically said that they still needed to regroup, do more research, and come up with a better remediation plan. So then in the year 2000, then they started doing more sampling. I think they did sampling twice a year in the spring and fall. And if I remember, they also did isotope analysis that got the age of the groundwater, and they showed that the moderately contaminated area was, I think, 36 years old, and then the highest contamination was something less than that. But it ended up where they basically determined that contamination started in 1964, and then peaked in 1973. And then in 2005, there was the East Branch Verdigris Creek project. That was where Nebraska Game and Parks were trying to protect source water for a trout hatchery. And no, I don't remember. So they finished that project, and then in 2014, NRCS and DEE worked to create a NWQI project. And then following the 2018 Farm Bill with the focus on source water protection, they redid the area for where the entire Bazile is now an NWQI area. And so this chart shows sampling from the East Branch Verdigris Creek, where the red dots are groundwater samples for monitoring wells, and the blue dots are surface water samples. And you can see that through time and through BMP implementation, there's a reduction in groundwater nitrate concentrations, but you see sort of a steady state of the surface water and a little increase at the end. And this just shows that the nitrates are moving through the groundwater and entering surface water there. And another important area, well, part of this is the population. So there's just over 7,000 people living in the Bazile, and over half those people do not live in the municipalities that are highlighted on this map. And this just, again, highlights the issue of the fact that municipalities are going to test their water while domestic wells are not. And so looking at moving on to the nitrate costs, or the costs of treatment, I won't go through this entire chart, but if we highlight, say, a town like Creighton, it's a town of 1,250 people. They built an RO plant, a reverse osmosis plant, in 1993. It cost them $600,000 at the time. They've since had to revamp that plant They have a loan for a little over $1 million. The O&M costs for that are projected to be $3.5 million over the next 20 years. And two other communities here highlighted in yellow. We've got Osmond, 800 people, cost of $1 million, or excuse me, $1.5 million to replace wells and towers and meters. And town of Plainview, which is like 1,200 people, and they're replacing wells and mains as well, for a cost of $1.3 million. So essentially, super small communities tasked with very large costs for treating this water, which is why a project like the Bazile is really important. So, got 5 minutes. The BGMA goals, short term, essentially just halt the trend of increasing nitrate concentrations in these tier 1 through 3 areas. Long term, we want to reduce nitrate concentrations to below the MCL in tier 1 and tier 2 and remove any public water systems that have been on administrative order. Also, we want to keep groundwater contamination and other non-point source pollution from impairing any surface water beneficial uses in the area. And I'll run through these tasks pretty quickly. The first objective, educate the public. We want to implement BMPs, and we want to identify needs of communities. We want to identify things like inadequate septic systems and create a program to assist with upgrades. We want to identify abandoned wells and create a program for decommissioning wells, and then obviously ongoing data collection as well. So as far as the partnerships, this is just a diagram to highlight the interplay between the agencies. We've got the NRDs, the DEE, the NRCS, University of Nebraska, Nebraska Environmental Trust, and aside from the Nebraska Environmental Trust providing solely funding, everybody else is doing multiple jobs. Funding's coming from the DEE and the Environmental Trust. The NRDs are doing education and outreach, technical assistance, monitoring, funding, things like that. So it's a really heavy lift that is helped by having all these groups work together on this. So it's really about leveraging partnerships within the state. And then I just have a quick slide, like this is just an example of one of those partners where UNL, the university, is doing practice demonstrations, public health programming, and always communications, education and outreach with citizen action groups, watershed science education, and human dimensions. And then this is just an example of one of the products they put together for an education and outreach, like a fact sheet on the Bazile. And then just to wrap it up, the activities in the Bazile, these plans have been adopted by all 4 NRDs and accepted by the DEE and the EPA. They've hired a watershed coordinator. They have a UNL extension educator. There are urban and agricultural demonstration sites. They've installed BMPs on over 23,000 acres. There's over $1 million invested with NWQI and over 300,000 in BMPs from 319, and then just the continued ongoing data collection. And then this last slide is just to highlight all the different partners that we're working with in the area where one group alone would not be able to handle this. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, we have Julie Westerlund to close out our session. I think I have I don't have anything else before. If you need it.
I think that's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. And once again, welcome to Minnesota. We are just so thrilled that you're here and hope you get out and enjoy a little bit of the good life on the water in Minnesota. And water really is who we are in Minnesota. It's so integral to our identity as a people and our heritage here. And as as Commissioner Kessler laid out for you this morning, it's really led to a lot of great investments in Minnesota, which we're really fortunate to have. So I'm going to try to wake us up a little bit here and make this interactive for just a second. When you think of non-point source work, what successful elements do you really rely on in order to get your work done? What makes your work go? What makes it successful? Passion. Go. Stakeholders, money, data, partnerships. Oh, all right, here's a little hint. Okay, so we are really fortunate in Minnesota to be blessed with partnerships and funding and data and passion and all of the things that you folks were talking about. And one of the things that I want to just drive home today is that, oh, got animation I didn't expect. Okay. That we're unique in the fact that we have resources available to us, but we're not unique in some of the things that drive our work and the themes around our work. So as I was putting this presentation together this morning, I was thinking about, what do I want to leave you with today? And, I can stand up here and say, we've got millions of dollars for implementation, but I also want to leave you with the ideas that change and partnerships and funding are things that you have available to you as well. And so thinking about how you can build on the success that you have, think about adaptive management, use the partnerships and the funding that you have to drive the momentum forward. It's really not that different. It just is operating maybe at a little different scale than what we have available to us here in Minnesota. So hopefully you can find some utility and value in what I have to say today. So as Commissioner Kessler laid out this morning, we are fortunate to have the Clean Water Legacy Amendment, which Minnesota voters voted in 2008 when the economy was tanking, by the way, if you remember that, to tax ourselves to the tune of 3/8 of a cent on our sales tax. And that generates millions of dollars for clean water, outdoor heritage, which is habitat, parks and trails, and the arts. And to date, that's generated, as Commissioner Kessler said, $1.7 billion in funding. And so I want to just describe a little bit more. I want to build on what she said this morning about our approach to spending this money in a really systematic and thoughtful way. And that really relies on an adaptive management approach. So how many of you use this to drive your work? You think about plan, you think about implement, and then you monitor, or maybe you start with monitoring, or, we started this cycle intentionally to say, we're going to kind of start with the doing because that's ongoing. We're always, you enter this cycle in a lot of different places, and then you adapt and you go through and you do it again, right? So that is how we think about our work in Minnesota. And we've gone so far as to further articulate that adaptive management cycle into some pretty detailed boxes of work to try to help each other at the state agency level understand how our work connects to one another. So we have 5 state water agencies that work really closely together on a variety of programs that are funded through the Clean Water Fund. And we also work with other partners in implementation. The agency that I work for, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, works mainly with local governments who are really our conservation delivery system in Minnesota. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. The work that Commissioner Kessler described this morning has to do with intensive watershed monitoring, which is being done systematically on a predictable schedule across each watershed in a way that really allows us to say meaningful things about the health of each and every one of our watersheds in Minnesota. So we have statewide coverage of really good data that gets summarized into a RAPS report, again, watershed restoration and protection strategies. And we have one of these reports now for each and every one of our 80 major watersheds in Minnesota at that 8-digit 8HUC scale. And that has led to Well, let me just back up and say that that work is funded by the Clean Water Legacy Amendment, the Clean Water Fund. So collecting the science is a really big emphasis, and especially at the first part of the Legacy Amendment was a huge push for making sure we had that data so that we could really understand how best to spend the money on implementation. And so the really other big push of the Clean Water Legacy Amendment is to do implementation. And as I said, much of our implementation happens with our local government implementing partners. So in Minnesota, we have counties, we have 87 counties, we have 90 soil and water conservation districts, which are based on county boundaries for the most part. And we also have watershed districts, which are special units of government that have taxing authority and are designated along watershed boundaries only where there has been a petition to organize those. So we don't have watershed districts statewide, but we do have watersheds statewide. And the fact that we now had this data coming in on watershed basis really made sense to think about how we operated at the local level as well. And so our local government partners got together and said, we should really be thinking about this watershed concept as well, and proposed that they do their planning and implementation on a watershed basis. So previously we've been doing county water planning, soil and water conservation districts would write a comprehensive plan, watershed districts would have a plan. We have 200 and some of these local government plans that talk about how they're going to spend grant funding in Minnesota. And with the transition to watershed-based data collection, there's also been a transition to watershed-based planning. And so the local governments that are involved in this is now in the One Watershed, One Plan program that I coordinate. And we're involving our counties, our soil and water conservation districts, and our watershed districts as foundational partners in those efforts, because they each have a role to play in water management, and they have unique responsibilities, authorities, funding mechanisms that they can bring to the table. And if we get them all working on a set of shared vision and goals, we think that they can go farther together. Municipalities and tribal governments can also participate in this process. The whole program is voluntary to participate in, but we've had really good participation. The folks come together, the local officials, so these are elected and appointed officials that are making decisions about the planning process. They also have community involvement in each and every one of these watershed efforts. And the beautiful thing about this process is that they have a lot of data to work with. And so the planning process, I like to think about it as taking data and running it through a local values filter to really think about what your priorities are. So just as an example, as these groups are coming into the planning process, they are presented with a whole bunch of reports. They get a RAP, the Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies. In some watersheds, they get a Groundwater Restoration and Protection Strategies report, GRAPS. Landscape stewardship plans. This is, looking at the forested parts of the state. Evaluation of hydrologic change, which is something that our DNR is putting together, recognizing that altered hydrology is a major driver in a lot of these systems. And so all of that information goes into that planning process and then informs where are the best places to spend our conservation dollars. And these plans are comprehensive. They're not just water quality plans. They can address a whole wide array of issues, and those really depend on what's present at the local level. And so we've been making really great progress on this program. The legislature set a goal for us back in 2014 that we would have statewide coverage of the program or statewide participation by the year 2025, and we are well on our way to meeting that goal. We have 60 planning boundaries defined. 57 of them are participating in the program right now. We have 40 plans approved. Those are the ones that you see in green. The other colors are just, sort of indicate when folks came into the program. These plans take about 2 years or so to complete, but we found that the more experience folks have in planning, the faster these things go. The planning efforts involve anywhere from 2 to 17 local governments. So depending on how the watershed boundaries intersect with the county boundaries, there can be few partners or a lot of partners, depending on how those same boundaries intersect. Any one local government might be government might be involved in one planning effort or 8 planning efforts, depending on how many watersheds touch their jurisdiction. So it really, though, we've been blown away by, for a voluntary program, how popular it has been and how well participated it's been. Of the 217 local governments that, you know, could participate in the program, I think I can say that we've had 200 and, let me see, I'll just do the quick math. I might be off by 1 or 2, but 213 that have actually joined. So only a handful that have said, no, thank you, we don't choose to participate. And, you know, the folks that are in this program really have found a lot of value in the partnerships, in that they're learning from each other, they're building relationships, they're doing better because they're seeing what their neighbors are doing. There's a little bit of peer pressure and competition involved there as well. But, you know, the real driver of the program has been what? Guess what? Funding. That's right, Glenn. How did you know? So there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for these folks. The big driver here is that participation in this program is voluntary, but you have to participate if you want to be able to access watershed-based implementation funding, which, do I really only have 3 minutes? Okay, all right. I will kick it along. Watershed-based implementation funding. These are the dollar amounts that groups are getting. This is just a selected, because I can't show all of them on the screen at one time. Each of these 60 watersheds is getting funding ranging from $250,000 to above $2 million. These are biennial amounts, so they get this amount every 2 years, and this is non-competitive funding. So let that sink in a little bit. Every 2 years, they get this amount of money. It's non-competitive. Plus, we have $9 million that goes to the Twin Cities metro area. And the total appropriation that we got this year is $79 million. We're going to go back to the legislature and ask them for more next year, because we're going to have more watersheds that are eligible for the funding. And our ultimate goal is that we get about 60% of the total Clean Water Fund coming into implementation of these watershed-based plans. And there's a variety of different kinds of projects that happen here. But I want to point out that this money comes still with a challenge. Even though we have a lot, it's not going to be enough to fix all of our water quality problems. So, you know, the need still far outweighs the available resources, and there's an expectation that we're going to be successful. So, you know, we talk a lot about accountability here, and we got to talk about outcomes. And so one of the things that's really important in this program is that we make good progress and have good stories to tell all over the state, and that has to be based on some really focused and concentrated work. So we have a theory of change here, which is that if you focus your efforts at a small scale, and you constrain that scale in space and time, that you can actually start to move the needle in a few areas. And so we're hoping to have some good stories to tell, and we're using this kind of mantra in planning to say, first, the thing you have to do as a watershed group of multiple jurisdictions is to decide what your priorities are for this watershed, and you've got plenty of data to allow you to do that. The next thing you need to do is target your implementation practices, putting the right practices to match the right issues at the right place, in the right time, in the right order, and then to be able to deliver measurable results. And so we're starting to see those measurable results now. This is just one example from the Greater Zumbro watershed, which happens to have 3 of our small watershed programs through the 319 process as well. And they've only been, you know, their plan was approved 2 years ago. And so they haven't been implementing for very long, but they've been able to really document their success and demonstrate that. And this is an ArcGIS story map. I would encourage you to just go and check it out to get a flavor for the kinds of things that are happening in local implementation. So if I come back to the themes, right? These are things that we all deal with. The change part of this, like, we're constantly evolving and we're constantly adapting, and we're building on previous success. We're building on what we've learned. We're building on what you've learned. We're taking ideas and we're going to keep doing that all the way along. We also have some pretty solid ideas about where we want to go, and we're going to stay the course on that vision. But that adaptive management approach and mindset, I think, has really served us well in Minnesota. Obviously, we don't do anything alone, and I talked just a little bit about the local partnerships today, but we have all kinds of partnerships in Minnesota. We have interagency partnerships, we have multi-level partnerships between the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the state agencies and the local governments, and we have associations of these local governments that we work really closely with. And by the way, the NPCA works with these groups a lot as well, so we really rely heavily on local capacity. But you know, there's limits there, as we've already heard throughout the last couple of days. And so that's one of our concerns. And then the final one is just, you know, funding builds momentum. So start with where you are and keep going. Use that to leverage. I'll just leave you with a QR code that you can go to learn more, including the really great story of how the Legacy Amendment came to be in Minnesota. So I encourage you to check that out. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers, and thank you for keeping us all on time. Oh, goodness, go for it. I think we have about 3 or 4 minutes, so if there are any questions, Devin has the mic. Oh, come on now.
We have one over here. Yeah, question for you, the partnerships or the participation from the different levels that you all discussed. Why do some people or groups or communities choose not to participate? And is there any kind of lesson there that you all know together?
Was that for me or for everyone? Go ahead. Everyone, I guess.
Is it on?
Yeah, so I think for us, one thing that we've learned is when you are asking for folks to participate in whatever you're asking them to do, you're competing with their other priorities. And so for us, it's how do we figure out or know what their priorities are, and how do we let them know that we're not saying their priorities aren't correct or, not the same priorities as ours, but how do we meet them where their priorities are, whether that's if you're talking to like someone who's prioritizing folks finding food, where do we meet them and think about food, whether that's providing food at an event or providing resources or connections to things that they're prioritizing on top of, and then bringing in what you're asking or hoping they would engage you with.
I would just say on top of that, I think trust is always an issue coming from the government, and especially with a lot of our work being with rural communities, farmers, things like that. So getting people to trust you, if it is us or if you're having farmer to farmer communication, sometimes the best buy-in comes from that. But also trying to show that things will be mutually beneficial, that you would that'll be mutually beneficial for them to buy into what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think specific to One Watershed, One Plan, there's been a little bit of that trust and, misperception about what might happen, and that particularly for local governments, that they might lose some autonomy in the process of joining forces with their neighbors. And, there was a misperception that we'd work really hard to clear up at the beginning, that this was going to result in, like, if we're in a partnership together, now I get to tell you what you can and can't do in terms of like your regulatory program or who you can work with or, that kind of thing. But we've been able to really get through that by just taking that head on and really clearly communicating to folks how the program works. So the misconceptions sometimes can result in, people not wanting to participate. But we've built the program. Basically, the idea came from the local governments themselves. So they told us what it needed to entail and what it could not entail in order for it to be successful. And we really listened to that as we built the program. So.
And maybe something, again, I know we didn't get to all of our slides, but one of our slides talks a little bit about people being able to see themselves right in the results or in the work that you're doing. And so several of the priority projects that are identified in connection with the flood model and receive funding to see them through were decided by the communities. So both the locations and the kinds of projects are deeply informed by the communities themselves within the watershed.
Do we have any more? Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Here's one for Julie. So it looks like you just finished a very thorough RAPS watershed restoration planning process. Now you get the one watershed, one plan process. How do these two intersect? Are you able to reuse lots of the work from the RAP process as part of the one watershed process?
Yeah, the goals that are set in watershed planning are based on the data from the RAPS. And so the MPCA actually has done a survey for several years now asking the local partnerships if that RAPS data was valuable to them. And overwhelmingly, yes, it is. And we're seeing those goals from the RAPS reflected in the local commitment to action. Now, MPCA is going back and doing additional monitoring, is going to update those RAPS to keep them current and relevant. And so that's going to also inform updates of plans. So the plans are 10-year plans. The RAPS are on a 10-year cycle. They're not perfectly synchronized. So we're working through that, but now we kind of know, where everybody is in the process and can jump into that adaptive management cycle. And so as we get more data, the plans will continue to be amended and the goals will be revised based on how much folks think they can know that they can really do once they've been working on things for a while and know how much funding is available to them. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I think we have time for one more.
Over here, sorry. I have a question from one of our Zoom participants. They ask, did the comprehensive watershed plan satisfy other EPA or FEMA required plans such as source water assessments or flooding being addressed by hazardous mitigation plans?
Okay, so the comprehensive watershed management plans fulfill the local government planning requirements, but they don't fulfill other programs. We do recognize that there can be connections to hazard mitigation plans and to the 319(9) key element plans, but those are operating at a little bit of a different scale. So one of the nice things about the comprehensive watershed management plans is that those groups can identify which priority watersheds they might want to go in and focus on for a 9 key element plan and pursuing 319 funding. So it's a way to, get folks together on that watershed basis and say, hey, where do we want to focus together?
We do one more. I'm going to keep you from the break.
Thank you. So my question is, do you on the panel, any of you have any experience with rebuilding partnerships after an attempted 319 watershed program fell apart? The short story is simply that my tribal group attempted to do that a few years ago. They did it the wrong way. It lost support. So we've probably broken some trust, lost some potential funders, lost some other people who think, well, that's not a big priority for them, etc. So if you have any experience with that, I'd like to hear it.
I don't have, well, I'll say a couple things. One, I don't have specifically experience with following a 319 project falling apart. But so I'm relatively new to this position in a year. And prior to that, I was 3 years in livestock compliance for the state. And prior to that, it was 4 years in Superfund and voluntary cleanup program with the same agency. But coming into the livestock section and then coming into water planning, it was really eye-opening how damaged some of these relationships are with other agencies within the state. And so we are literally making this concentrated effort over the last year and a half to just mend these relationships like with our NRDs. And it's like, sure, we give them money for funding, but we have to do a lot more in order to, again, like we said, like leverage these partnerships and make it so we can actually come up with projects together that are going to be successful. So that's sort of my take.
So I mean, I personally don't have experience in regards to 319 funding, but just as far as what are the different kinds of practices that help us to repair harm, something I have some experience with is something called the practice of counsel, which is really about people giving space for people to share their stories. Again, we didn't really get to it, but a call to action on our end was how asking people to examine, stories that are yours. And often the stories of entities, people might be stepping in, that might be harms that were from the past that you're inheriting. And we want to acknowledge that even if you inherited it, you can't just say like, that wasn't me, that was them, right? You have to own it and be able to apologize from an authentic place. And then often, again, like this practice of counsel is really just engaging in like, it's a set of like circle and relational practices that give people the opportunity to share their stories. And again, just like with crew can be hired, there are people that could be brought in to facilitate spaces that help repair harms. So I just would encourage you to, look into people who might be skilled in facilitating a space. Again, the physical environment, as well as also, I think, really important. So, to help with that. Say it one more time, I'm sorry. It can be either. I mean, often in those kinds of dialogues as well, there's like sort of opening practices where people are able to like engage in a lighter dialogue first, and then you might move into a deeper conversation that, and again, it really is about sharing stories. So it doesn't become about like a shame and blame or in that way. It's about being able to just share something that you've experienced or that you witnessed. And often I think just by being heard, that often has a really healing quality to it, and starting there.
And then I'll just add as an example for us, and on top of what Lee said around having a space to do it, sometimes in our municipalities and at the local level, we as a nonprofit watershed organization is actually seen as a neutral ground especially when we engage with development projects. Examples of longstanding colleges in Boston that have harmed local communities. We come in and bring the perspective of from the river as well as climate resiliency. And then in those settings, residents are able to ask questions and express themselves as well as the other entity. And then we kind of become a mediator and then bring it all together and tie it into this is what the river needs. And that has really helped with a lot of the projects that we've worked on.
All right, one more time for our speakers. Thank you all so much for sticking around with us. And I believe we are on to a break. So enjoy your coffee and tea, and they're around if you have questions. Can I shut these off, or is it gonna like?
Hi.
Oh, they named me I know my mom was like, I only think you are young. Sorry. I really do.
So you control the on from wherever you are.
This one's always been, and this one, when you turn it on like that, it gives it like a second, and then it.
Hello, folks. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. So if we can get folks from out in the hallway to come in, move toward the front if at all possible. We don't need to be so far away. We can be a little bit more intimate. Come on in and grab a seat, folks. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session on leveraging non-point source non-point source program work with the state revolving fund programs, often shortened to just the SRF program. I'm Don Way with EPA headquarters in Mike Scazafava's branch. Because I'm the session moderator, but also a presenter, I'm going to introduce my co-presenter, Elise Turrieta, and then she's going to return the favor and introduce me, and we'll get going here. Now, Elise over here is, she's an ORISE fellow at EPA headquarters, and she's researching use of the 319 program and the state revolving fund programs to address non-point source pollution through innovative financing strategies and protection of healthy waters. Prior to EPA, she worked at VIMS, the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, supporting aquatic health research on emerging contaminants and pollutants in the Chesapeake Bay. She also did a stint with NASA. Not a big deal. Maybe she'll tell you about it if you ask her later.
Thank you, Don. And I have the pleasure of introducing Don Way, who has 4 decades of experience managing programs and projects at the local, regional, and national levels to lessen the impacts of land activities on America's streams, rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. For the past 21 years, Don has worked in EPA headquarters to support the 319 program, and in recent years, he has investigated ways to leverage Clean Water State Revolving Fund investments that strengthen state non-point source management programs, and he also continues to support CESARA.
Thank you, Elise, and not one day at NASA. So I don't know if you recall, day one, Monday, Mike Scazafava standing up here near the beginning of our time together. And he said, gee, I'm sorry, I don't have $1 million to give you because you guys would actually know what to do with it to solve our non-point source problem in the nation. So nation's #1 water quality problem, as if he's Congress. So I just want you to hold that $1 million thought for a moment. And I will see if I can advance this slide. Snap you into reality here because the non-point, oops, what did I do? Here we go. All right. Yep. So back to reality, the non-point sources are implicated as a primary cause of impairment in about 3/4 of the TMDLs that have been written. And that's the picture on the left. And we really want to change that picture. We really want to take that on. And as Mike said, the 319 grant money is not scaled up to the size of the problem. You can see on the right side that less than 4% of all the clean water SRF dollars over the years have gone toward addressing non-point source needs, just 4%. Today, we're not going to focus on drinking water SRF, but that can be important for anyone wanting to support source water protection activities. But the bulk of the SRF involvement in the non-point source world is with the clean water SRF because it was added to the Clean Water Act in 1987, same time 319 was added, and the statute links the two, particularly in the Clean Water SRF eligibility criteria. Something can be 319 eligible, and that qualifies it for Clean Water SRF financing. So just because it can be done doesn't mean it's easily done. And we want to, people have had challenges. That's why we're at 4%, not at 75%. So we want to figure out what those challenges are so we can address them head on. Look, we got numbers. We got the B, billion. We're trying to work with the Clean Water SRF programs because it's theirs, like Mount Everest. It's massive. It's not going away. It's getting bigger every year, and it has the potential to do a whole lot of good to address non-point source needs. It already does a whole lot of good to address point source needs. We're trying to figure out how to make it work better on the non-point source side. It's not something we should ignore. It is the elephant in the room. So as you may have heard, it got even bigger in 2021 with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. Around EPA, we call it Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or bill. It was already by far EPA and the nation's largest water quality problem or water quality fund, used for, dedicated just to address our water quality problems. And there's a whole lot of money sloshing around in those 51 state water quality infrastructure banks. There's 50 states and Puerto Rico has one as well. And they manage the Clean Water SRF program funds. In FY22, the most recent year the data is available, 9.63 billion was provided to water quality improvement projects. Of course, the vast majority of those went to wastewater utilities in the form of loans with below market interest rates. We don't have the numbers yet for FY23. We expect them to come out actually later this month. I expect it to come in around $10 billion. And we're in FY24 now. I expect those numbers to come in over $10 billion for water quality infrastructure. So that's $10 billion a year in financing. If we're lucky, maybe 3% will go toward non-point source work. But what even is 3% of $10 billion? That's right. It is $300 million. $300 million. Let that sink in. So what if just 1% more went to address non-point source needs? It's another $100 million. Now you just gone from 300 million to 400 million. Well, what if 10%? Some states are already doing 10%. I see a lot of Iowa folks here. It's one of the states that's doing at least 10%. What if you did 10% clean water SRF nationwide, went to non-point source projects? Well, there's your $1 billion a year to address the nation's #1 water quality problem. And that still leaves 90% for the point source folks. Last year, NEIWPCC held its first national source water, state revolving fund workshop in New Hampshire, and one of the speakers described it as Scrooge McDuck piles of money. But unless our program asserts itself, the projects they will fund with it will largely be the same old point source projects. Now, compared to the numbers on the previous slide, this one shows 319 grants over from 1990 to 2022. Doesn't even come close. At most, it was 238 million. That was 2003, 20 years ago. And it's been hovering fairly steadily between 150 and 182 million a year for the past dozen years. Now, see if I can do this. By comparison, the blue line bouncing up and down through the gold 319 line, like so many kids hopped up on too much Halloween candy, just jumping around that gold line. That's what 3.4% cumulative use of clean water SRF looks like. And that's for the non-point source projects. That's actual data. So even just that small percent of clean water SRF funding for non-point source eclipses 34 years of funding for 319 grants. Now, I would say it's not nearly as targeted on outcomes as the 319 grant program, but it's potentially hugely important, and we can do a better job targeting even with the SRF dollars. So I want you to pay attention to that blue line again. Now, it's likely that most of those dollars represented under that blue line belong to the state. They're recycled dollars. The revolving fund is called the revolving fund because it's mostly a loan program. It gets loaned out and then it gets repaid back to the state. Even if there's a federal aspect to it, it goes to the state then uses that money, loans it out. When it's repaid, those are the recycled dollars. They're state dollars, they're not federal dollars. Most of the money in circulation in these state infrastructure banks, they belong to the state. All that can be used as match for 319 if the eligibility criteria for the projects that were funded were 319. It doesn't matter if it was in a different watershed or a different category of non-point, it can count as match according to our own attorneys, and the statute is pretty clear that states need to come up with 40% match. It doesn't say that states need to pass on that requirement to grant subrecipients. So this is a really potentially a big deal when it comes to moving forward on our equity issues. So this will help disadvantaged communities avoid having to come up with a 40% match. Just in 2022, FY22 alone, 26 states used some amount of clean water SRF for 319 eligible projects. So that's a big, option for those states that have chosen to do that. So maybe you're wondering, where does my state stand with all of this clean water SRF stuff? Well, here you go. This is the national picture of clean water SRF funding for non-point by state. This is based on what state SRF programs report to EPA through their programs database. I'll leave this up for a little bit so you guys can look at your state's numbers and shading. And this is for 34 years of funding. This wasn't just FY 22. This is through FY 22, starting in 1988. First year money was available after the 87 amendment to the Clean Water Act. There's lots of non-point source categories in the database, and it breaks it down by these different categories. We're not going to go over every single one, but since we are in the upper Midwest, that would focus on agriculture. There's also this push to address nutrients. A lot of it does come from agriculture. So we're a little bit focused on that. And it looks like Dell recommends that I install updates right now. So I will ask to be reminded about that later. And look at you, Minnesota. Yeah, that's right. And Oregon, a few other states. And here's the picture for animal ag. Again, Minnesota, looking mighty fine. Also, Iowa, Virginia. And I'll turn it over to Elise to show you some of what she's uncovered in her work. Cue up her slide.
Okay, let's see who's looking good for land conservation. Ohio, Iowa. So yeah, some of the work I've done has been looking specifically at land conservation. This is a topic that has come up in some other discussions this week, mainly about the discussion of using 319 funds for protection of healthy waters and thinking about land conservation as a strategy to do that. But as this is a non-point source category, land conservation, the Clean Water SRF can also fund this work as well, whether that's through outright purchase of land, through fee simple purchases, or through the purchase of conservation easements where the development rights of a land parcel are purchased. And based on project level data from the Clean Water SRF, at least 20 states have used these funds to support land conservation projects so far, for a total of over $500 million in project funds. And the states using Clean Water SRF for land conservation are shown here, as well as project counts. Switching gears a little bit, another way to see the impact of the Clean Water SRF in the non-point source world is to look at non-point source success stories, another topic that has come up in presentations this week. So these success stories are where impaired water bodies are either delisted or show some sort of non-point source improvement. And success story data shows that at least 22 non-point source success stories have relied on Clean Water State Revolving Fund contribution to lead to that, either a delisting or a water quality improvement. This has resulted in a total of 164 water quality improvements in 126 water bodies. This is at least. This is an estimate on the low end. We think there could be more. And here showing the dollar amount in total for these different success story types and the states and territories that are using Clean Water SRF to make really significant non-point source impacts. So this is really promising work, just showing the extent of what the Clean Water State Revolving Fund can do for non-point source work. And that's it for me. Don's on the move, but I'll turn it back over to him next.
Amanda's looking a bit nervous. So I wanted to share with you a resource that can help you navigate this SRF world. It's just different than our world. And sometimes I think we're a bit siloed sometimes, and we want to break down those silos and move forward. So we developed this guide. It came out in late 2021. Non-point source best practices guide is providing folks with a vision and an understanding of what's possible and how to achieve it. States are essentially running 51 very different experiments on how to finance water quality projects through this loan program. And some of them have innovated their programs in extremely creative ways. The guide harvests the best practices from the states that have innovated the most successfully in this area. A lot of the states have been doing things in a helpful way for Nonpoint for many years. Some of them are just getting into it. We're going to hear from a state that was an early adopter and a state that's really starting to get into it now. The guide will help allow states to carve their own paths forward, what's going to work best for them. We're going to hear from 3 of the innovator states in this session. We hope what you hear will inspire you, set some goals, do something with your state that hasn't been done before, even if it's just to agree to meet regularly. So in 2017, EPA headquarters set out a partnership between our 2 programs, Nonpoint Source Program, Clean Water SRF Program, talking to each other, collaborating, trying to figure things out. And we started to work with states interested in changing things up by providing some technical assistance with a contractor that had particular expertise in this area. The first one was to stand up a Nonpoint Source sponsorship program in Vermont. Don't worry if you don't know what sponsorship is. I think Julie might be covering a little bit about that in her presentation, and we can get to that. And we also have a section in the best practices guide on what sponsorship is. Walk you through some examples. That was in 2017. And some of you may recall the last time we met in person was 2018 in Colorado Springs. And we brought the Vermont State Revolving Fund person with us to talk about what that project was all about and what her state was doing and why she was moving in that direction, why she wanted to move her state in that direction. In that case, it required a change in the state statute, and the consultant worked with Vermont to make that, to actually provide testimony to the legislature and make those changes happen. So just because it's in your statute now doesn't mean it has to be in your statute forever. Fast forward to today, and we've now completed 11 technical assistance projects in as many states, mostly with branch funding. Thank you, Mike, and Mike's predecessor, Linda Hall. 2 of the pilot projects have won EPA's coveted Pisces Award for exceptional clean water state revolving fund projects. The Pisces Awards may not be something that you all are familiar with, but is an extremely coveted honor in the SRF world. One of the award-winning winner states was with Kansas SRF, and Amanda, I gave the mic to Amanda. What are we looking at here? What is this a picture of on the slide? Is it working?
Is this on? Okay, this is a Hagee Highboy interseeder. Typically it's used to drive over like corn that's pretty high, and you can top dress with nutrients at some point in the growing season. But we partnered with a company called Montag, and they fit these highboys with seed boxes on the top, so that rather than driving over with nitrogen, late in the growing season, you could drive over the corn and plant cover crops down in the rows so that it could get a start growing. And by the time you harvest the corn, you've already got a cover crop established. And so with this project, it's funny because Don, they brought Vermont to the meeting to talk about it. And I immediately went to talk to Don and said, I'd really like this consultant to help us figure out what our eligibilities are and can we do this project. And we ended up getting 8 interseeders and partnering with co-ops around the state, asking them to provide this service for farmers in the area who weren't maybe ready to take the risk on cover crops, and kind of provide the service for free and try to grow capacity in our state for soil health and cover crops.
Who's the guy on the right in the picture?
Oh, that's the administrator. Yeah.
That was this past February. That's why he's bundled up. But yeah, the administrator, they were showing off. This is not something that the state SRF program had ever considered before, wasn't particularly interested in, but Amanda and I think Andy Lyons were very persistent, and this is something that you'll be proud of later. They end up winning an award for it. So it was a win-win situation. A lot of good recognition, a lot of good mileage out of this, and it's still moving forward today. That is it from me. And now we will actually, let me go and read a bio. We do have a handout on the EPA table outside that has just a short snippet on what all 11 of these technical assistance projects are about. And what else do I want to say? Let me introduce, so let me just leave you with a challenge, and that is to try something with your clean water SRF colleagues that advances the Nonpoint source agenda with them, even if it's just to begin to meet with them regularly. Break down the stovepipe. Just start there. Starts with a conversation and see where it leads. If you're already working with them, what can you build on? You're not alone. We can help. We helped Kansas. We helped 10 other states. We're going to hear from 3 speakers we hope will inspire you. First up is Dave Calhoun. He's a project manager in the Wisconsin DNR Bureau of Community Financial Assistance in the Environmental Loans Program. He has also served as the Bureau's Nonpoint Source Grant Manager. He's the lead for developing the agency's Pilot Projects Program, which is a sub-program of the Clean Water Fund Program for funding non-traditional, that means us, projects. Please welcome Dave Calhoun. Let me set up his slide. And here you go.
Thank you, Don. Welcome, everybody. As Don said, I'm Dave Calhoun, a project manager in the Wisconsin DNR's Bureau of Community Financial Assistance, Environmental Loans Section. I'm happy to be here today to tell you about our progress so far in developing our pilot projects program for funding non-traditional projects. And if I can get the technology figured out here. Let's advance. Does this do it? So first, just a little programmatic overview. We run our loans programs through an umbrella organization known as the Environmental Improvement Fund that unites 2 of our state agencies, the Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, and the Department of Administration, or DOA. And yes, they've heard all the jokes about their acronym. We administer 2 programs, the Clean Water Fund program for wastewater projects, and the Pilot Projects program is a sub-program of that, and the Safe Drinking Water Loan program. So if you're interested, here's the statutory authorization for the Pilot Projects program. About 10 years ago, we started developing this. So far, we have focused on funding water quality trading projects, or WQT projects, for phosphorus reduction, but other kinds of projects may be eligible. Let's see. Wisconsin has a similar scheme in place called adaptive management, but so far WQT has turned out to be a better fit for our funding. I'm not sure, the terminology may differ somewhat from state to state, but what we're focusing on is water quality trading. So here's just a little of the history. Back in 2010, the state set more stringent phosphorus standards for surface waters. So why focus on phosphorus? Well, Wisconsin is an agricultural state, of course, and we've long recognized that phosphorus in runoff, especially agricultural runoff, is a big problem. As you know, excess phosphorus leads to harmful algal blooms and other bad things. So in 2010, the state set these more stringent standards, and some WPDS permit holders received very low phosphorus limits in their permits, some at 0.075 milligrams per liter, and even some as low as 0.05 milligrams per liter. Since it's very expensive for a municipal wastewater treatment plant to squeeze that last little bit of phosphorus out of its effluent, the state came up with some alternatives to help municipalities meet their permit limits. One of these is water quality trading, which the legislature authorized in 2011. And under WQT, a permit holder partners with non-point sources of phosphorus in the watershed or sub-watershed to reduce the overall phosphorus load being discharged. And this is often more cost-effective than an upgrade at a wastewater treatment plant. So for example, a municipal wastewater treatment plant may partner with farmers in the area to install BMPs that limit polluted runoff from barnyards and farm fields. They get DNR approval of their WQT plan. They sign a WQT agreement with us, the DNR, and they sign binding agreements with landowners. Usually those take the form of a conservation easement, and those easements are recorded with the county and run with the land. So if the landowner sells the land, the easement continues. And once this framework was set up, the DNR looked at how the CWFP could be used to finance such projects starting around, starting around 2013. I wasn't involved in the early stages because I had just moved next door to the grants section and was learning the basics of my new job as the managing Nonpoint and other grants. Over the years, this effort was put on the back burner at times due to other priorities that came up and our workload. This may sound familiar to some of you. For example, we developed programs to fund the replacement of lead service lines in drinking water systems, and those were major efforts. They took a lot of work. Around 2019, we started devoting more time and effort to the PPP, but it still has to compete with things like figuring out how we're going to administer the bill funding. I mean, the bill funding is great, wonderful, it's a historic investment, but it comes with a lot of extra work for us figuring out how we're going to handle it. In 2020, we closed our first loans for WQT projects. We've closed 5 loans for WQT projects so far. So really, we're even though we've kind of been at this off and on for 10 years, we're just getting started. But anyway, it's a start. And then back in 2021, we received technical assistance through EPA and Northbridge Environmental Consultants, for which we're very grateful. Northbridge helped us think outside our usual boxes, helped us explore various funding mechanisms, and conducted some useful outreach to municipalities. So I thought I'd just show you some nice pictures of one of the projects we did. This is a water quality trading project we did with the City of Independence, which is in west central Wisconsin. It's in the driftless area, so it's a hilly area, some areas that are subject to a lot of erosion. This project this is showing some stream bank work that was under construction. There's a stream flowing along that tree line there from lower left toward the upper right.
This image, by the way, is the courtesy of RES, RES or RES, who was the consultant on the project. Let's see. Here's another photo of this, showing some of the stream bank work they did, shaping, stabilization and seeding, and gully stabilization. That sort of row of boulders going across the middle there is some of the gully stabilization. And this was a big project. I mean, they did a lot of work at this site. There's another view, and again, off in the distance there, you see another one of their gully stabilization efforts, and you can see the general kind of stream bank, shaping, seeding, and so on. They actually did work at 2 project sites on that farm that I just showed you, or stream flowing through a farm, and at a city park. So this is on the Trempealeau River, which, as you can see, is a pretty good sized river in a city park. And again, they did stream bank work here. And just another view. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some current projects that we have going. We just closed a loan a couple of weeks ago or so with the village of Belleville, which is a village near Madison, the capital, where I work, for a water quality trading project. We recently received an application for alum treatment of a lake for phosphorus reduction. And when we first started talking to this lake district about this project, we were skeptical. We weren't at all sure that we wanted to fund an alum treatment project, but in talking to the water quality experts in the area, it sounds like this is the only feasible alternative for this particular situation. So we're moving ahead with it. We're currently looking into funding green infrastructure projects with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, or MMSD. Note that MMSD has GI requirements in its WPDES wastewater permit. So this is a little different. Let me see here. And although we've only financed a few projects so far, we know that there's interest out there. Municipalities, if they want to apply for a loan from us, they're required to submit a notice of intent to apply, or ITA form, before applying for a loan. And we've received over 24 ITAs for this fiscal year. So those won't all turn into loans, but they let us know that people out there are thinking about applying for pilot project loans. And this loan to MMSD that I mentioned, if it closes, it will be a big one. I mean, it could be as much as $36 million. So it would be huge. And it will be a pro-fi approach, meaning bundling a bunch of, small projects or BMPs into one loan. And note that MMSD is not doing water quality trading. They're unique in the state, as far as I know, in having GI or wet weather management requirements written into their WPDES permit. And that is largely due to their history. MMSD has a history, going back decades, of having some combined sewer overflows, CSOs, and bypassing and things like that. That has improved a lot in recent years due to the construction of a couple of deep tunnel systems. But the district is huge, right? There are, I think, 28 municipalities that are part of MMSD, and a lot of it is kind of low-lying flat area on the shore of Lake Michigan. I think a lot of it was kind of marshy prior to European settlement. So they have that, and they have combined sewers in older parts of the district, basically downtown Milwaukee and areas nearby. And they have issues with I&I, like, some illegal connections of downspouts to the sanitary sewer system and things like that. And here is a page from their website, in which they're talking about their green infrastructure efforts. MMSD has been very active in promoting green infrastructure for several years. They've been leaders in this area in the state. And here's one of their web pages about that. And here's a recent excerpt from their newsletter, Blue Notes, in which they announced that they've reached 100 million gallons of stormwater storage. And they have a very ambitious goal to capture the first half inch of rain that falls on the district, or about 740 million gallons. So, like I said, they're huge. And a little bit about challenges and lessons learned. One of the challenges has been other priorities. Like I mentioned, we developed at least a couple of programs to fund replacement of lead service lines in drinking water systems. That came up. Our workload in general, like just trying to keep up with our regular stuff. Adapting our forms, to go from wastewater to Nonpoint, including our financial assistance agreement, or FA as we call it. Revising our internal processes, like figuring out what we're going to do about plan review and inspecting projects, things like that. And also just in general, change is hard, right? Like even as an individual, you may decide you want to make some change in your life and you may be highly motivated, but still it's hard, right? Like you might decide, oh, I want to lose weight, I want to exercise more or something like that. But it's hard, you got to have a plan, you got to have intention, you got to have accountability and all that kind of thing. So you scale that up to an organizational level. It can be hard, and there may be some people in the organization who don't even want to make the change. So we've had over the years, I would say, some internal resistance, but I think our staff is coming around. Like, for example, one difference between the municipal wastewater world and the Nonpoint world is that if you think about a municipal wastewater treatment system or wastewater treatment plant, it's a closed system unless it gets flooded or something, right? And you have a lot of hard numbers, whereas a lot of Nonpoint work is based on modeling. And I remember one of our engineers expressing skepticism about modeling. He's saying, oh, modeling, that's just an educated guess. So I had to do a little advocacy and say, these models, they aren't just guesses. Some of these models have been around for a long time. They've been revised over many years. Some of them are pretty darn good. And I think staff are especially coming around as they consider, well, what are the alternatives? And one of our engineers recently, this is a person who I think was pretty skeptical early on, but he recently said, look, we have a lot of smaller municipalities out there. It isn't feasible to expect them to construct these very expensive upgrades to their wastewater treatment plants and then properly operate and maintain them over time. This WQT thinks it seems like it might be a good alternative. I mean, it's generally cheaper, and very often you can keep more phosphorus out of the waterways. So it's a win-win. So what does the future hold? There are reasons to be optimistic. We still don't know for sure what the long-term demand for WQT and pilot project loans will be. And we have a recent development in Wisconsin. We just launched a WQT clearinghouse to facilitate trades. And the push for this came from outside the DNR. It really had nothing to do with our efforts. It originated with agricultural groups and some legislators. The state contracted with a private firm to operate the clearinghouse sort of at arm's length from state government. Our partners over at DOA are kind of keeping an eye on it, but this private firm is running the thing. And I think if the pilot projects program or these kinds of projects become increasingly popular, I think it will probably be due to demand from municipalities wanting to do water quality trading. That has worked out to be the best thing for us so far, and I expect that going forward, that will continue to be the focus. So if you have questions, here's my name, our CWFP coordinator's name and info. And thank you very much for your time and attention. Questions, right?
And we're going to hold the questions until the end. And next up, we have Julie Kelso. Julie joined the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in April 2022. That makes her a seasoned pro at this point. She's currently the SRF Nonpoint Source Program Manager for the State Revolving Fund Program. Prior to that, she was a fellow at the EPA in the Office of Water and the Office of Wetlands, Oceans, and Watersheds. Oh, wow. Where she worked with an interagency team to develop the streamflow duration assessment method. Please welcome Julie. Let me set up the slides. There we go. That bad boy. Okay. Now we'll press this button here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Don, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you guys about Iowa's State Revolving Fund Nonpoint Source Program, the Swiss Army knife of nonpoint source funding. And I didn't come up with that tagline. We've had it for a while now. So State Revolving Fund, what is it? We all throw around acronyms, myself included, but that doesn't make it okay. So we'll say SRF a lot, which is State Revolving Fund. You'll see CWSRF, which is Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is just not the drinking water SRF. So as Don mentioned, this is a form of recycled money. So the EPA gives states their CAP grant, and states loan that out through their state bank. Ours is the Iowa Finance Authority, and then we get that money back. And we get the interest back, so the fund grows. So they call that the recycling money. I've heard it called laundered money. It loses its federal identity. And then some states leverage, which Iowa does, so bonds, etc. So in a nutshell, our SRF program is jointly administered by Department of Natural Resources and Iowa Finance Authority. We also work with Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, who provide us technical assistance on our urban green infrastructure projects. IDALS and DNR and IFA also coordinate with soil and water conservation districts for 3 of our linked deposit programs, which I'll talk about. And our county sanitarians coordinate with DNR IFA for our on-site wastewater linked deposit programs. So, partnerships, that's what we're here to talk about. Partnerships. Couldn't run our program without these partners, and even more than what I'm showing here. We have lots of partners at the state and local level. So I'm going to talk about, give a brief overview of the 4 non-point source funding mechanisms that Iowa has. Then I'll talk in more detail about our 4 linked deposit programs. I'll talk about our sponsorship program, and then briefly go over pros and cons of the linked deposit and sponsorship funding mechanisms. So Iowa uses multiple funding mechanisms to address non-point source issues. We have direct loans, loan participation, linked deposit, and sponsorship. So direct loans are your most straightforward loans. This is what most wastewater infrastructure loans are. Their borrower is usually a municipality, and the Clean Water SRF funds are used to purchase municipal bond debt. So we loan cities money to do non-point source projects.
Loan participation, the borrower is usually a nonprofit, which we consider, moderate risk compared to a city, versus a private property owner will be considered high risk. And with loan participation, the funds, the borrower works with a private lender of their choice. The private lender can offer any interest rate of their choice, and then Clean Water SRF funds are used to purchase that existing loan from the private lender. And then with linked deposit, the application is actually taken by our Soil Water Conservation District or the county sanitarian. The borrower is always a private landowner, and Clean Water SRF funds are deposited with a private lender, again, of the borrower's choice. And those funds are then used to fund the loan and reduce the interest rate for the borrower. So as I briefly mentioned, our 4 linked deposits are administered through our at the county level for our 3 linked deposit programs: our livestock water quality program, local water protection program, and stormwater protection program. And then we have 1 program that's administered by county sanitarians along with DNR and IFA, and that's our on-site wastewater assistance program. So our livestock water quality linked deposit program funds manure management practices, for example, covered feedlots, waste storage facilities, manure pits, rotational grazing, and drinking systems. This is specifically for smaller operations, though. There's a limit on the size of the operations. And then our local water protection linked deposit program funds soil conservation practices on private properties. So grade stabilization structures, terraces, grass waterways, filter strips, etc. And then our stormwater linked deposit program funds stormwater management practices on private properties. So detention basins, bioswales, rain gardens, and stream stabilization. So what I'm showing you here is a bioswale and rain garden at a intentional community. I think it's a co-housing community. And then that is a stream stabilization in someone's backyard in South Des Moines. And then for our on-site wastewater assistance program, to be eligible, applicants must own a home with an existing septic system in an area not served by a public sewer. And systems that we replace must include both a septic tank and secondary treatment. So now I'll talk about our sponsorship program, briefly go over that funding mechanism. It's essentially, it is a interest rate reduction on an existing Clean Water SRF infrastructure loan. So you can only do a sponsored project in Iowa if you are in a watershed with a municipality that already has a Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. So a city is upgrading their wastewater treatment plant. They can choose to sponsor a project in the same watershed that the wastewater treatment plant exists. And so you can see that the cost of the Nonpoint source project doesn't affect the principal of the loan. So there's no increase in rates to the community. So we did an inventory of practices that have been done with Iowa sponsored project since 2014. We've had 151 applications, 106 applicants, and 194 planned or completed practices across the state. And so these are the practices that we've implemented that have been completed and constructed so far. So we've inventoried 157 of those practices. Our top practices include permeable pavers, bioretention cells, stream stabilization, and stormwater wetlands. We've kind of had a variety of other practices through the years. You'll see we've kind of advanced what we call a stormwater wetland. So we've previously had things like detention basins, basin retrofits, sediment control basins, et cetera. But as the designs have progressed, we now call them stormwater wetlands. This is so when we inventoried our practices, we also recorded the water quality volume in cubic feet that the practice was designed to treat. So I'm showing here water quality volume treated for our top 4 most common practices. This is directly correlated to drainage area. So if you just plotted the drainage area that these practices drained, it would look almost the same. And in theory, you could calculate a cost per cubic foot of water treated, but I wouldn't trust it, so I didn't do it. If you want to know, I'm not going to talk a lot about quantifying water quality impacts, but I'd love to talk more if people are interested. Okay, so pros and cons of linked deposit and sponsorship funding mechanisms. With linked deposits, borrowers can work directly with a local financial institution, so someone they know, they trust, they can communicate with regularly. And then our partnerships with these local program administrators and lenders reduces the administrative burden on SRF. And for that reason, SRF can efficiently assist and implement a lot of small loans. The cons are, as are the cons with a lot of programs, is turnover in staff at the state and county level. So just educating county sanitarians and soil and water conservation districts about what the program is, what's required, and what the benefits are, makes it hard to implement the program consistently. And then with sponsorship, the pros are you get 2 projects for the price of 1, so a non-point and a point source project under 1 loan. And this can really enable small communities that normally would not maybe even think about doing a stormwater management practice or have the capacity and funds to do so to implement that practice. And we hope that these communities can serve as kind of a demonstration stormwater management, practice to other communities around them. Cons to the sponsorship program in Iowa, at least, is that our applicant pool is limited to communities with a clean water SRF loan. And also the project funding and timeline for the sponsored project is dependent on the infrastructure project. So the amount that we award for the sponsored project can be reduced if, for example, the infrastructure project doesn't draw the full amount that they expect. It's rare, but that does happen. And likewise, depending on when their principal payments start, that can reduce the amount available for the sponsored project. And also sustainability of the fund over the long term. So depending on the robustness of your particular clean water SRF fund, the interest rate reduction, you may have a lot of interest rate loss in interest rates over time. So in the future, we're currently looking at our program as a whole and seeing what kind of improvements we can make. With our direct loans, we're thinking about offering a discounted rate even below our current, below market rate, possibly even a 0% interest rate loan, and then hope to market those low interest loans to communities that are that have a stormwater utility. So communities with demonstrated interest in managing their stormwater. With linked deposit, we are hoping to increase our outreach and education efforts at the county level to help the program get better advertised and better implemented. And with sponsorship, we're going to continue to implement our existing sponsored projects that have been awarded. We have about 40 projects in the work right now. And we're also going to encourage those communities and others to consider the benefits of a discounted loan. So there is our website and my contact information, and I think we're gonna do questions later.
Next up, we have Carson Moscoso, and Carson's the Nonpoint Source Fund Coordinator for the Washington State Department of Ecology's Water Quality Programs. Water Quality Program, Carson manages the Section 319 pass-through funding to subrecipients implementing Nonpoint Source best management practices at the local level. And let me cue up his presentation here. This is the last one. We will work to make sure everybody gets out on time and still hopefully have some time for questions. Here we go. Please welcome Carson.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, like you said, I'm Carson Moscoso with Washington State Department of Ecology. Today, I'm going to be talking about how we fit the state revolving fund into Washington's combined funding program. And so in the state of Washington, we have one grant round, one competitive grant round every year, and we allow our applicants to apply for multiple types of project funding and project types, all in one grant round, as shown here on this figure. We will take funding from multiple sources, whether it's federal, like SRF, Section 319, and then also our state funding. We call it Centennial, but it's state dollars from the legislature, and other state fundings for stormwater activities. And folks will submit their grant applications regardless of whether they're proposing a point source or non-point or OSS or other type of actions, or multiple types of actions with one application. And then we at the state will evaluate those and rank them based on feasibility and water quality benefits. And then we can decide how the funding sources that we have available can be applied to different agreements so that those grant recipients can use either state funding, federal funding, whatever makes sense for their type of project. And we'll also give grant funding and or loan funding out at the same time. So we've had recipients get both SRF dollars and our state grant funding or Section 319 funding for the same project. And then we'll publish one combined funding offer list every year to encompass all of those project types. And so within this, just for the SRF funds that we have, like it's been mentioned, I think several times now already, that the SRF kind of the dollars that we give out through our SRF funds have they come from a few different places, whether it's the funding from the federal government or our loan repayments from past funding rounds, past projects, and interest on those. And we can turn those around and we can give out low interest rate loans or forgivable principal loans as well. And so within this competitive funding round, we have it be as predictable as possible. Every year, it is from mid-August to mid-October. Our grant applicants, our seasoned grant recipients are familiar with this process. And so they're communicating with our regional non-point staff or other staff about what projects they have upcoming for this coming year, and we'll work with them to make sure that they're aware of any funding guideline changes that we have from previous funding years, and then we start our evaluation process, which we're currently in right now, actually, and then in that evaluation process every year from about mid-October to mid-December, we review, rate, and rank all of our applications based on water quality benefit and the feasibility to implement them. And then we'll also decide at that time if there's a project type that is best fit for loan funding or grant funding or both, depending on what the applicants have submitted to us. And currently with our SRF, for over the last 30 plus years, we've turned around about $2.7 billion for water quality activities. Recently, we've been giving out about 250 to 300 million. That's mostly in point source, but we have seen an uptick in non-point. I have a couple slides of what those have been recently, but we have seen more non-point over the last couple years compared to previous decades. With our SRF loans, we do offer pretty low interest rates. They vary depending on the duration of those loans. And for non-point and other hardship, we can potentially offer even lower rates than our standard. So for our combined funding round, our eligible entities consist of special purpose districts, towns, cities, counties, and tribes, and then also nonprofit entities, although they are currently only eligible for Section 319 funding. So I've got a few examples of non-point projects that we've funded over the last 10 plus years with SRF funding. Those are typically land acquisitions, conservation tillage practices, and OSS. And so this next slide here is an example of a land acquisition that we funded a couple years ago, where the grant recipient was able to purchase some land for drinking source protection. I should have switched this out to a current project that we have actually with a local tribe in Western Washington. We're in the process of loaning out about $6 million for land acquisition for riparian restoration activities after they've completed the acquisition portion of it. But again, land acquisition in general is an eligible activity that will fund with SRF through Nonpoint. For conservation tillage, it's a lot of direct seed and equipment purchases or loans. Specifically in Eastern Washington in the Spokane area, that's become fairly common now. There's a conservation district that has been quite active, which is actually my next slide here. Spokane Conservation District has been running a direct seed loan program for the last 20 plus years, where they've been they help farmers either purchase or rent the application equipment, and so far in the last 15 years they've implemented these practices on over 700,000 acres of ag land in Eastern Washington. The Conservation District actually, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, has expanded that out to other conservation districts within the state of Washington, even some West Side conservation districts as well, who are promoting the conservation tillage practices to West Side ag producers. So it is an expanding program, which is what we're looking for. And it's actually really nice that this particular conservation district has kind of taken the lead and will run that for other conservation districts so that they can kind of provide that oversight and the expertise that they've been doing for a long time. So people aren't reinventing the wheel. Although we do have conservation tillage loan programs with other Eastern Washington conservation districts as well. And then lastly, OSS. the state of Washington has a partnership with a nonprofit lending company, organization that has been, they'll work with landowners with, failing septic or septics with that need some kind of repair to be in compliance. And since our last 30-ish years, we've offered out over $50 million through SRF funding to help those landowners. That's been over 1,000 projects thus far, and it's become an expanding program. Just over the last 5+ years, it's been getting a lot more interest, and we expect to be giving out a lot more SRF funding going forward. I believe this is going to be shared out with everybody, the PowerPoint.
Everybody's gonna get
Yeah.
version of slides.
Excellent. Okay, well, I've just got some links here to some of the programs that I just talked about, and a couple project highlights as well, that are the links are embedded here in the slide. And try to keep it quick so we can take some questions, but that's my contact info as well. Thank you.
Very good. We're going to open it up for questions and possible discussion for anyone, including me. So hopefully somebody from the NEIWPCC, Devin will walk around with a microphone. And I think for the virtual folks who may not have heard my answer, when Carson asked about will the presentations be available, Devin, it's my understanding that they will be available, maybe not right away, but after a little bit of time in PDF form. Is that correct? Devin is nodding his head yes for the virtual folks.
Hi, I have a question about the link deposit program, and I saw that, you know, the loans are very, very cheap, but I can't imagine that a for-profit bank is going to give you that same rate, nor forgive any of the loans. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, we put a cap on the interest rate of 3%. And the other question was, oh no, we don't do loan forgiveness for. We use the Department of Natural Resources and Iowa Finance Authority, who co-administer our state revolving fund program. And you do loan forgiveness for your on-site, but is it a direct loan?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's not public. Correct. Washington State Department of Ecology.
And for the virtual folks, if you're not mic'd up, if you understand the question, go ahead and repeat the question. But that last question was about decentralized link deposit, and then, okay, so it's link deposit. Okay.
That's okay. I'm Ginger Murphy. I work with Julie in the Iowa SRF Nonpoint Source Program within our Department of Natural Resources, and really appreciate hearing about other states' SRF programs and how you're flexing to do nonpoint source work. It is very challenging because it's typically not a regulated community, and there isn't always a repayment method for a loan, and this is a loan program. So my first question is for Dave. I didn't hear you mention interest rate reduction or loan forgiveness when you talked about the loans that you guys are offering. I wonder if you do those things. And then maybe something about the criteria you would use to determine who gets lower interest rates and loan forgiveness. And then the question for Carson is similar. How do you determine who gets loan forgiveness and a lowered interest rate?
Yeah, I did not talk about the financial details. What we have said in our guidance is that pilot projects can receive an interest rate as low as 0%. And so far they have all gotten 0% loans. We do not offer principal forgiveness for pilot projects, mainly because since they're pilot projects, we think, well, they're by definition, they're experimental. You know, we don't have a scoring system set up like we would need to allocate principal forgiveness like we do for our regular loans. So far they've been 0% loans. And another thing that I didn't mention, but as I think you all know, in the Nonpoint world, it seems like people are mostly interested in grants, not loans. Some people aren't even interested in a 0% loan or some other subsidized kind of loans, but our municipalities, on the other hand, you know, they're used to working with our loan programs. So to them, a 0% loan often sounds like a good deal. And one of the things I'm going to suggest is that to our, to our department, to my department colleagues, is that we think about sunsetting this pilot projects program, concluding the pilot and deciding, well, what are we going to do in the future? Are we going to continue with this? Is it going to become a regular permanent feature of the CWFP? Or are we going to sunset it and decide, well, that was interesting, but we're not going to continue to do that. If we decide to continue it as a regular permanent feature, we'll have to come up with something different, I think. Maybe in the future, there may be principal forgiveness available for some of these projects. I don't know. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, and for the state of Washington, the hardship is typically given to small disadvantaged communities, and that's a term that we have there. I am actually not our SRF loan coordinator, so I don't have the super specifics of that. But if you send me an email, if you're curious about learning more specifically, go ahead and do that, and I can connect you with those folks that do.
I also want to mention that we didn't really get into this, but one of the features of the new infusion of bipartisan infrastructure law funds into the Clean Water SRF is more than a doubling of the size of the federal capitalization for this CAP grant term, this capitalization grant that the federal government provides to the SRF programs each and every year. These are not the recycled dollars. These are the non-laundered dollars, I suppose. So there's the regular base federal CAP grant. And then during the 5 years that of new bill money, we're coming up on year 3 now. It's called the Clean Water SRF General Supplemental Fund. 49%, and I think this coming year is going to be 1.6 billion from the federal government allocated to the 50 states and Puerto Rico, and there's some other allocations, smaller allocations here and there. 49% of that general supplemental is to go for principal forgiveness or in the form of grants for disadvantaged communities, or at least as long as the benefit goes to disadvantaged communities. The hard part is it's also lumped in with a bunch of earmarks that accounts for probably almost like 45% of the overall extra money comes with these strings attached. But states right now are in a bind because they're trying to figure out how to use that money for loan forgiveness, and they want shovel-ready stuff that will help disadvantaged communities. So it's a tightrope. The good news is that you don't have to worry about paying back the loan. The bad news is it's going to be hard for non-point source to compete. And I don't know, did I miss anything, Karen? Is that about right? Okay.
I have a question about the other 51%.
It's general supplemental.
You can send,
It can be used for non-point.
what about emerging contaminant? It doesn't have to be spent on emerging contaminants?
No, emerging contaminants is a separate fund.
Okay.
They get $1 billion over 5 years, so it comes out to, but they got a little bit less the first year, but they're going to get like 200 million, 250 million, something like that in this next year. I forgot what the exact number is. I don't know if you know it, but 250, 260 million, don't quote me. But yes, that's just for emerging contaminants. And oh, by the way, emerging contaminants is not just stuff like PFAS and PFOA, but also some cyanotoxins associated with HABs. So there are some HABs eligibilities that come with associated with emerging contaminants. I'm going to let NEIWPCC figure out who to.
I had a question until you cut me off, Don. So question for Julie, and I know that you and I can talk anytime because we're in the same section, but so this is really more of a conversation for the room. But our non-point source plan in Iowa encourages SRF applications from within 319 watershed project areas to try to make sure we're getting as many projects as possible to try to address an impairment. One of our examples was when the city of Monona put in a pervious pavement parking lot at its swimming pool that was at the headwaters of Silver Creek. And that was when we had the Silver Creek 319 watershed project. That's now a non-point source success story. So it was a great collaboration between an SRF project and 319. You showed the Wakan stormwater project as well, and that just got an award. That's at the headwaters of Paint Creek. We have 2 319 projects downstream on Paint Creek and Little Paint Creek. So I don't know if Wakan was aware of the work going on downstream, or even if the DNR fisheries staff who applied for those Paint Creek projects were aware of the Wakan stormwater application. So it makes me wonder if we should work on collaborating with our application forms just to make sure that they might be more aware of that, or more information about their watersheds that they're in, so that there might be more cross collaboration between some of those SRF projects and our 319 projects.
Okay, I'm going to try and summarize that question. Should there be more collaboration between 319 and SRF on our applications? And by that, do you mean your watershed, your project applications?
Maybe, I don't know.
Just any applications? Okay. Yes, there should. And I have got a couple questions throughout the week. You know, so you're going to present on your collaboration with 319, right? Sure. Yes, we definitely depend on our 319 coordinators and program for their intellectual capital that they provide on what's going on in the watershed. And we try to include them as much as we can on our non-point source projects. I think we could do better. But I think another struggle we've had, I think, and Don alluded to this, is it's hard with the Clean Water SRF money to target your funds to a specific impairment, right? So that's so maybe 319 could help us do that, is like target our funds.
All right, we're going to clap for that one. We're going to clap for that one. We're not over, but that's the thing, because a lot of the link deposit stuff, what they're doing is they're tailoring, they're subsidizing certain BMP types. They're prioritizing those BMP types, but those BMP types can be placed anywhere across the state. So I think her predecessor, when I asked the question about targeting, he said, well, the practices are pre-approved. That's the good news. And then his words were, what we're really doing are random acts of BMPs. That's not what we want to do. And that's why our 2 programs need to work together to figure this out. I was going to ask Dave, and we have a question in the back. I was going to ask Dave real quick. You talked about the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District green infrastructure loan package that's going out. Can you tell me the size of that? Do we have an idea of the size of that?
Could be as much as 36 million, so it'd be huge. As I think I said, they've been installing BMPs all across the district. They've been doing it for a few years now, so it could be huge for us.
Okay, thanks. Question in the back?
Thank you. Chris Davis with Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. One of the things that we've been having conversations with people that we've been encouraging to look at the SRF program for watershed projects is to turn it around so that they're being proactive instead of reactive. Most of these potential applicants have operation and maintenance costs built into their municipal budgets to deal with damages that have occurred due to flooding or other erosion type things. So instead of, if they can do the loan program, put the practices in at the beginning of the process, then they're actually using the money that they would have been using to repair things to pay down the loan. So they're actually getting a couple of positives there with, again, less impairments and problems in the community itself, but also showing their citizens that they're being positive instead of going back and just refixing things that had to get fixed every other year. So there really wasn't a question. It was just, this is how we're trying to handle it. And it's slow going, just so you know.
Thank you. I'd love to talk to you more about your program.
So I have a question to follow up on Don's remark about the Milwaukee MSD and the use of clean water SRF funds within the NPDS or long-term control plan CSO jurisdiction. And we've had a lot of discussions about use of 319 funds for NPDS stormwater projects or not using them. And I was wondering, I don't understand the intricacies of the criteria for 319 criteria for the use of clean water SRF funds. And I'm just wondering if that's an issue or whether I'm just creating a red herring here in terms of how those funds, are they really not 319? They're not really 319 projects if they're within those areas. That's sort of what I'm getting at.
Sure. So a prerequisite for, this is sort of a generality, and we have Karen Chagru in the room from the Clean Water SRF program who can correct me if I get it wrong, but let me take a stab at it. And that is, in order for a project to be financed, there's going to be some public notice about that, and that's in the form of the intended use plan, which comes with a project priority list. And that's something that's at a minimum updated once a year. Most states do it twice a year, sometimes more. They have some states have multiple funding cycles within the year. Some do at least once a year, some do more. And every time they have a new cycle, they have this project priority list. We love acronyms, PPLs. And each project is specified, and the eligibility criterion for each project is listed out. And so if something is mentioned, if the 319 5-year management program plan mentions sanitary landfills, then a sanitary landfill project qualifies under the 319 eligibility. And obviously, it's not something that most state 319 programs want to prioritize. But if it's mentioned in the plan, it's 319 eligible, and they can use that to specify it as a 319 eligible project. It gets a little tricky with MS4s. There are also stormwater eligibility criteria, and state clean water SRF programs need to decide, is this a stormwater project or is this a 319 eligible project? If they have questions, they should be talking to the 319 program folks in their state or to EPA. And I understand that vetting occurs before each new cycle. Robert, did that answer your question?
I had a similar question for Carson. You had 4 categories for your applications, and stormwater and Nonpoint were separate. So do you know how you separate those projects?
Mostly, yeah. Stormwater projects are typically those within a city, and they're going to be in an urban area. They're not going to be, so they're like stormwater treatment facilities or some sort of infrastructure along the roadways. Anything else, whether it's in a park, in a natural area, or outside of the city is Nonpoint. Other than that.
Sometimes a project may have multiple potential eligibilities and the state has to decide which one ultimately to use. If it's at all related to urban runoff, they may choose the stormwater eligibility just to keep a safe distance from getting in trouble with the 319 program.
Yeah. Sorry, Julie, to follow up on you a little bit. It's also dictated by BMPs that are eligible with our funding. So Nonpoint will have a specific set of eligible pest management practices that will fund, and stormwater will have others. And so depending on what the applicant is proposing to do, that's how they fall into that category. So, and we have some applications where they fall into both.
We're going to end the session, but we're not going to end the conversation. I'll be up here after the session. I don't know if the others will be. Also want to make an announcement that if you are signed up for the field trip, we are Water Minnesota. Meet in the hotel lobby at 5:15, especially if you're relying on the bus for transportation. And there was a sign-up sheet. If your name isn't on there, you're probably not going to get a seat on the bus. Also, there is a basketball game on the 6th floor at 5:45 tonight. Excuse me?
It's at 5.
Oh my gosh. All right, 5 o'clock it is. So I'll be around for a limited time and then I'll be dressing up, hurting myself. So thank you for coming. Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow. 5, really? Okay. And we still have it till 7?
No, we're ending early because some people are going during stuff tonight. So.
Oh, okay.